Welcome to the podcast Crash, Burn, Rise Again, where we share stories of burning out and rebuilding better. Join myself, Shireen Lister, your host, and my special guests as we share our personal journeys through burnout, stress, overwhelm, and more, and show how we came out the other side. Learn and leverage from the lessons and wisdom we gained along the way so we can help you to rise too. Hey, welcome everyone to episode 7 of the podcast. It's so good to have you tuning in, and I have another very special guest today, Romina Cavagnola from Alchemy of Alignment Publishing. I wanted to make sure I got that right. Welcome, Romina. So delightful to have you with me today.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. It's really exciting to get on a podcast again and have a chat.
Fantastic. Now, Romina, you're a story coach, which I must admit, you're the first story coach I've come across. I've been following you and seeing you for a little bit on social media, but we haven't chatted before. Mm-hmm. And you in particular, you help women connect with their soul story and producing and publishing that. Can you share a little bit more about that? Like, is it that in small form, book form, or everything included? Tell us a little bit about what you do.
Sure. Well, it kind of really depends on what they want to get out of the process. I don't only work with authors of books, but in general, most of the women who come to me, they're like, I have a book in me, but it feels a little bit overwhelming. You know, how do I sort of start to explore this? And some of them might want to, start sharing their story through their business content. Usually they're business owners. And so they want their content to feel more connected and feel more aligned with what they do and how they present. So, if they were to show up and speak, they want to make sure their written content really reflects what they do without sort of making it sound a little bit boring or a little bit too bland. Most of them are healers, mediums, things like that. And so their concern is they want to make sure the magic of what they do comes across. And so by working with their stories, it really helps to emphasize that aspect of their work. And then, of course, if they want to write a book, then we have, different ways of doing that, where, they might just want support with writing their story and drawing it out and structuring it and making sure that it really conveys what they want to share. And then some of them might actually also want support with physically producing the files that they can then use to self-publish. So it's really all about an empowered self-publishing journey where they get the professional quality while they still, maintain control over their story and their book.
Beautiful. Oh, it sounds lovely. And I think sometimes I've definitely seen this for people when we go into business, we suddenly think at first we have to be so professional and leave ourselves at the door. But particularly when we're a service-based business, like you and I are, and a lot of your clients, we are our brand. And what makes us connect, isn't it, is our stories. As a trainer, I've learned how to embed stories from my life as metaphors for the content that I'm teaching. And it's the same sort of thing that you're saying of how to bring all of yourself into it in a way that's aligned. So that's very beautiful. And I think such a needed thing for a lot of people who feel a bit lost about how to start that journey and how to get inspiration from within. So thank you. That's incredible.
Thanks.
But it's not always what you've done, is it? And, you're telling me when I was inviting you to be on the podcast that you were in a work context that really wasn't serving you and was really quite toxic for a while. So can you tell us a little bit about what you used to do and what that environment was like?
Sure. Well, I started off doing a graduate program. So my whole career before this was corporate. And so I came out of uni into a graduate program, and that was a couple of years long. And I found that quite intense and also not really aligned with what I wanted to do. And it was in IT, right? And that's what I studied originally, and information systems and processes and things. And I felt like this is just not really right for me. Went back to study, had another couple of jobs and ended up in a job with a really great team. My last corporate job, I had a really great team. I loved working with those people, but the company itself just had this really extreme focus on, following the market trend with like apps and stuff. that they wanted to help their clients, which, I mean, obviously from a business perspective, that makes sense. But as a result of that, there were constant organizational restructures that kept changing our teams around, interrupting the dynamics of the working environment. And just as a result of that focus, it sort of filtered down, to our levels where, all of a sudden my job changed yet again. And so by the time I left, I was doing a job that was nothing to do with what I signed up for originally, without really being given a choice throughout the 7 years that I was there as to how my job changed. And it was kind of like, oh, and by the way, now you're going to do this. And it's like, okay, but like, and so it got to a point where the job was way too technical for what I was comfortable with. And I'm not someone to shy away from a challenge. I do love learning. And so, for the most part, I took it in my stride and said, okay, well, if, I'm not really very good at this, or this is something I'm not familiar with, I would get good at it, But throughout that time, there were instances where, my performance was questioned, but I hadn't received training in the thing that they were questioning me about. And in particular, that those things happened during times where I was actually unwell. And so I felt like this is really not an appropriate approach to the situation, right? So, if you had supported your staff at the beginning when the job changed, which was not really anything to do with me, I had to basically find my own resources and ask my own questions to whoever to get, up to speed to what they expected, but they, didn't provide the training. And so I was constantly feeling like I was trying to catch up with my job. And I mean, I did, I was, improving with everything, like all the bits that were not really what I was supposed to be doing. And of course, there were aspects that I was comfortable with because that was my background. But I constantly felt challenged in a negative way in that role. And I kind of got to the point where I felt like it shouldn't be so hard to be able to do my job, and to feel like my strengths were always, underestimated and not really utilized, and constantly going, okay, well, now we need you to do this, but like, here's a booklet, or here's like, it wasn't really, it didn't really feel empowering, right? Yeah. To stretch myself. And so I felt really burned out throughout the last couple of years of that job. And in particular, I came back after maternity leave as a single mother. So I went off on maternity leave. I was still married. I came back as a single mom. And so, obviously that's a challenging journey in itself. Even just becoming a new mum is already quite exhausting and a big transition. And so I went within a small space of time, I went from, being a new mum to being a single mum. And although I still have my ex-husband's support, it was obviously more challenging than I had anticipated, because I was going into it as a married woman and coming out of it, without a partner, and going back into this corporate role almost full time. And it was like there was not really what I would call adequate handover period when I came back. They kind of just expected that I'd pick up where I left off. And I thought, well, I've been away for almost a year, or it had been a year at that time. And, I needed a minute to realign with what I was doing. Not to mention things have changed since I've been gone. So there's all these new things that I have to suddenly learn. They had a completely new like staff portal thing that I had to learn how to use. And the first week or so that I was back, my boss was still on leave and my senior staff member was still on leave. And there was basically no one in my team around that could really tell me what I needed to be working on. And my computer wasn't ready. So it was a really like shove into this like deep end experience. And then because, as you know, once you have a baby, you have for quite a while baby brain. And, it's really hard to just suddenly pick up something and be as sharp as you were before. And I felt like that was a problem in the environment that I was in. And it was brought up. And I said, look, I can't be who I was before. My brain is different and things are going to take me a little while to get used to again. And I might have to ask questions that seem stupid, but, you know, I have to relearn some aspects of what I was doing because it's different now. And, you know, unfortunately, there's nothing else that I can do other than what I'm already doing, you know, which is to revise on things, to ask questions. And I got up to speed, you know, in what I thought was fairly quick amount of time. But, you know, again, it seemed to be a problem. And so then my job changed again. And then it was like, okay, I can't do this anymore. And I said to my boss, look, it's time for me to start thinking about moving on. This was about more than half the year that I'd been back. And I just said, look, I can't, like, the job is going where I can't go. My brain is just not happy to go there. And it's just too stressful and it's too much travel and too many everything, like too much everything. It was just enough. And actually a few months later, I was made redundant. So
convenient.
It was convenient. And no, my boss was really understanding. And I felt like it was a blessing, really, because I was kind of being, you know, handed a little, like a get out of jail free card to go and explore what I wanted to do and to have time off, which is what I really needed. You know, like it had been a stressful job for a long time for various reasons, not only the work like constantly changing, but also, you know, there was some management issues that, you know, caused other issues in the team. And so there was a lot of that kind of like, oh, I really just don't want to go to work today. And of course you go and then you're like, yeah, I should have just stayed home. And so that kind of feeling over the years really does accumulate more than I realized. And that was kind of the start of something completely different for me. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad it started where you've ended up, but gosh, what an awful way to go about it. And I find it really frustrating and really infuriates me, because this is the area that I work in, is supporting companies to help their staff with their well-being. And this clearly was a company that had no idea how to do that and no idea of how disregarded you felt, how disenfranchised with them you became because of it. And because you just feel like a number, don't we, where we're shoved around a little bit, and then it's like, but you're not performing up to standard, but you're not given a chance to really do that. It really frustrates me. And you're not getting the best out of your staff then. You know, if you had have been doing the aspects where it was your strengths and your passions and you were supported to do that, you probably would have been delivering far more for them. Not that you weren't doing a good job, but, you know, you could have really excelled in that. And I think there's such space for corporate to talk to their staff about what they enjoy and don't enjoy and their strengths, and try and structure around that where we can.
It does. And we did have that conversation, actually. Like the last manager I had was great. And, you know, once he really sort of understood where I was coming from, he's like, okay, well, we can't have that. And so, you know, there was even one aspect where he's like, well, I'll train you in that because I know like about that, that particular aspect of our work. And that actually became one of the things that I was kind of in charge of in our team. Like I was the one, like the go-to one that was, you know, expected to know about those different issues. And he, you know, then gave me a project that was really, you know, it was quite a big project. And that's part of my background as well, project management, where I felt, okay, this is actually really interesting and I really want to be working on this. But, you know, inevitably it would constantly change and go, actually, we can't do that project anymore because the organization has changed again. And so now we need to do this thing. And I'm just like, oh. So he did try. And I'm grateful that he heard my concerns, because previously I felt like, okay, nobody really cares. And you do kind of feel a bit like a number. And as I mentioned, I loved working with that team. They were all really supportive, and we just had fun. You know? But as in the organization overall, it felt a bit like feel good.
The issues are higher up, then it's really hard to create localized change. Absolutely. And then it sounds like as well, you know, not sure, because I know work is the big thing here, but there was a lot going on in your life as well that probably was a factor. You know, sometimes we don't recognize things at the time, and I don't know if you have since, but, you know, for whatever reasons of it all, your marriage ended, you know, in that time of great change in becoming a mum anyway, like surely that would have been a factor in it as well. And it's just like we start to stack things. And I think this is what happens sometimes in people's lives. We can handle one thing, work not going well, we can handle one thing, a new baby, but let's stack 3 or 4 things together. Did it feel a little bit like that? Yeah.
It did feel a little bit like that, but I have to say that was one area where I really felt their support. Right. So I actually spoke to my boss before I came back a few months in and said, look, this is what's happened. And I want to let you know beforehand because it's going to be challenging for me and I might need a bit more flexibility. And, you know, he was happy to like work with what I needed. As long as I did my work, he didn't really mind, you know, what arrangement suited me. So in that respect, I actually felt a lot of support with the consideration that, okay, well, now she has to do all the things. It was more in like the work context where I felt like this is just not right. And it was more like I stuck with that job for a number of reasons over the years. You know, there was, you know, mortgages, there was, you know, the plans that we had, holidays and stuff. Like, you know, I had enough flexibility at the time and salary to, you know, enable the plans that we had, you know, together, obviously with my ex-husband's income as well. We, you know, we bought a house, we had an investment property and the things that we wanted to do. So, you know, for a long time, I convinced myself that I had to stay in that job. And there were many times where I felt like this job doesn't feel right anymore and I should leave. But I think I was a little bit afraid to make the change as well. And, you know, once it got to the point where I said, I need to leave, like it's it's no longer I want to leave and do something else, like I need to leave, I cannot be here anymore, then the situation fixed itself to allow me to leave in the best possible way. And it wasn't even one of those situations where it's like, oh, by the way, you're redundant and don't come to work tomorrow. It was in 3 months you're going to have no jobs, so you know you've got plenty of time to finish your work and do handover and look for a job and decide what you're going to do. And it was really helpful for it to be that way, so I could actually think about what I wanted to do and you know, just make plans, which in the end didn't really work out. That's another story, but but yeah,
that is a lovely way to have it happen. And so then you left the job, you stopped burnout fits the next day, all resolved? No, obviously not. Wouldn't it be nice, sadly? Yeah. What things did you do then to get to a place where you were recovered, you didn't feel so stressed and burnt out?
Okay. Well, just to add another layer into the mix, I had literally just applied and gotten approved for a loan on my own. And the next day I was made redundant. So, so that was fun. So that obviously was prolonging the stress a little bit. My initial plan was to take a month or 2 intentionally without working. So I still kept looking for jobs during that time with the intention of starting a couple of months later. So I had proper time off to have that rest that I'd been seeking for a long time. But I quickly noticed, because I started job searching while I was still in that notice period. In the end, I think it was about 6 months after I actually left, so 9 months after I was given notice, I finally realized I'm not going to find what I am looking for. And obviously I didn't intend to take 6 months off work. But I think I didn't realize how much I needed it and how much in denial I was about what I actually wanted to do. And so one day I was still kind of a bit stressed out because I was like, I'm not finding a job. At some point, my redundancy money is going to run out and I'm going to be screwed. And my son was being a little bit, that week. And so it got to this one day where he was at daycare and I was like, I just need a break. Like, I just want a break. And so I picked him up from daycare, came home. He didn't want to go upstairs. He wanted to go for a walk. So, we lived across the road from an Aldi at the time. And so there was a huge car park and he wanted to walk on, the little edge things. And so then suddenly he's like, oh, I'm going to run around the car park. No, I don't think so. And so I picked him up and he had a tantrum and he was like kicking and screaming while I was holding him he was like a plank, like a stiff kicking plank. And I was just like, I just got really angry and I just was stomping back towards our apartment. And we have these really high curbs because, the area where we live, they've got like this sort of heritage curbs. And I didn't realize that I was on the edge of it, and I slipped off with both feet, and I twisted because I thought, okay, I'm going to fall onto the road on top of my son. So I twisted so that he would land on top of me instead. And in doing that, I broke my left ankle, and the other, well, it felt like I'd broken both of them at the time. The right one wasn't broken, but it was extremely sprained. And I couldn't see, like I had this static thing, and all I remember was just screaming and clutching my son. And so long story short, we ended up at my parents' for 6 weeks because we lived in a flat with no lift. And during that time, my dad said, "Oh, so have you found a job yet?" And I'm like, "Really? Like, we need to be talking about this right now." I mean, obviously he was like, "Yeah, well, you need a job soon because, money's going to run out at some point." And he suggested that I try freelance writing because I'd been talking about that for a very long time and never really done anything about it. And he thought that seemed like a good time to try. And I thought, well, it's not really very secure kind of job to just like randomly try freelance writing. And, and he's like, "But you don't have a job. So what exactly are you risking to try, Yeah. And so that's basically how my business started. Like literally from one day to the next, I was like, okay, I guess I'm starting a business. I made a website. Within a couple of weeks, I had a client, 2 clients actually. And that's how it started, literally freelance blogging for a couple of companies, and slowly started to get independent clients and things. And so like, it's been kind of really a couple of years of a maintained level of kind of stress, right? About different concerns. So it's not like I ended my career at this place that was, a not really very healthy environment, and suddenly like I'm free. Like there was a time where I felt like, okay, there's definitely relief and there's definitely rest and like revitalization going on, but there was still this underlying current of stress because I didn't have a job. And even though I was lucky enough to have the finances from the redundancy to tide me over for quite a while, and of course, you single parenting payment and things that you get because of your situation was all helpful, but there's still that level of like, no, I need to be independent. I need to like find a way to take the power back, I guess. And I decided to sell my apartment, which kicked off another layer of, everything. It took me a year to sell the apartment. I listed it a couple of months before COVID hit. And so the timing of the listing and the pricing that I had at the time quickly was irrelevant because of everything that was going on. We couldn't do open homes. We had all these issues. And then in the middle of it, I had to actually change agents because the bank, they had given me, when you, they give the COVID relief period where you don't have to make payments for a while. We did that. And because of the redundancy thing. And they're like, yeah, you can have this time, but you have to change agents because if they haven't sold it in this amount of time, they're clearly not going to sell it. So, that was part of the requirement to, get everything sorted. And so I'm just like, oh my God, so I'm going to fire this agent and I'm going to get a new agent. And then in the end, that took ages to sell. So it's like, this actually made no difference. And I ended up actually selling it for less than what I paid for it because I was like, I just need to get rid of this because it's just hanging over me. I had a car accident. And then I was like, that's it. That day that I had the car accident, it was minor, but it was just like the final straw for me. And so I called the agent. I said, call that guy. And if he says this price, just sell it. So, so it was just like one thing after another. It was like, I couldn't escape from all the things that kept happening and all the stress. And so, I sold that because I wanted to get rid of the mortgage and just focus on the business and growing without having that responsibility. And rent instead. And so, it's only recently gotten to the point where I actually feel more comfortable and I know that this business is going where I want it to go. And that's largely because I finally had to take a look at what I was doing and say, okay, where can I focus my energy that actually gets me results? And I realized that it wasn't in doing freelance blogging or in content coaching and things that I was doing in the first year or so, the first year and a half. It wasn't until I said, okay, this is what I'm doing. I'm working with stories and I'm working with books, which is really where my passion is and my background anyway. Like I actually have qualifications in English and publishing, and a lot of my work experience is in developing content and writing. And I'd done book projects and stuff before. I thought I need to do this, and I finally got the guts up to actually say this is what I'm doing. And once I started doing that and talking about that kind of work, I started doing and wanting to work with me. And I felt like finally I was really in my element, because it was a feeling that I'd had when I did these projects quite a while ago. It's like 12 years ago now. I was doing these book projects for a few years. They were volunteer projects that we did. And that feeling that I had then, I finally have it back now. And so
that's great.
Yeah, it's really good. And the thing that I've realized as I build the business the way that I need it to be is that I finally have control over what I do and when. And that means that I can build in the rest that I need. And so it's only really very recently that I've felt like the burnout, even though I haven't been in burnout, for a while, I've still been sort of detoxing from the effects of the burnout, So it's been like an exploration, really. Like, it's not like I just magically knew what to do to fix the burnout or to fix, the lingering, the residual effects of it. But it's been like, okay, what makes me feel good? When do I feel like I need rest in the day or during the week? And I've tried a number of different ways to try to build that in. I've even had like scheduled my whole week, and on Mondays, this is what I do. On Tuesdays, this is what I do. And, trying to make sure that I rested. And that worked for me for a while, actually, where I thought, okay, in this block, this is my me block, and I can do whatever I want in this block without feeling guilty. So if that means I can read a book, or I can go for a walk, or watch Netflix, or whatever it is, even if it's for 2 hours, it doesn't matter, because that's my block, right? So I made sure that I had that time where I felt like I was getting to do all the things that I wanted and needed to do. And then after a while, okay, this doesn't feel quite right anymore. And so I made it different. And so I think that one of the things that I would say about how to support yourself through burnout and making sure that you are getting what you need is to notice when it needs to change, because it's not necessarily going to stay the same forever, and especially as you become well from, the effects that you were experiencing, you might realize that you've got other areas where you need to focus on. So where I no longer felt like mentally burned out, because mostly it was a mental burnout as opposed to a physical one. I mean, there was definitely a physical element. And the breaking of the literal, I want to break and I got to break, right? Like that was it was forcing me to stop like trying and to push everything and to fix everything. Like I could literally not fix that. So I was forced to sit there and rest. I was forced to, think about, what do I actually want to do with my life? Because I'm just wasting time now. And I don't want to keep doing things that I don't want to do.
Yeah.
And I don't want to keep stuffing my life into the time that I'm allowed to have outside of my job. And so that was a very big thing for me. And that's when I finally realized why I couldn't find a job, because the thing that I needed didn't exist. And I was no longer willing to compromise my life and my family time, for like to earn money. Like there's got to be a way to earn money that's not, misaligned with me. And I found it. Like it's, it's not perfect, and it's still, a work in progress, because I'm not where I need to be to feel comfortable. But it's definitely shown me that it's working and that it's giving me the things that I need, which is not just an income, but the freedom to make the choices that I need to make, so that I can be there for my son, so that I can do the things that I need to feel supported for myself, or, to help my family, or to do whatever else I need to do. I can help out at my son's school if they need help from parents. I can, be there to pick up my son. I can take him to swimming. I can, and those are things that would have been so hard to do, and I would have had to fight for them in any, not just necessarily that job specifically, but in any other job. I would have to constantly feel like I needed to defend my position as a mother, or I would need to beg permission to be home because my child is sick. And now I don't need anyone's permission. I have to, maybe sometimes I have to say, look, I'm sorry, client, but my son is unwell, and unless you want him crying next to me, let's move our meeting. Or sometimes it's just a matter of saying, look, my son's at home because he's unwell, and if you don't mind that he might pop in, we can just still go ahead with our conversation. And most people are fine with that because they understand, the situation, and some of them are mums as well. And so they're like, that's okay, my kid's here, so it doesn't really bother anyone. But if that was a situation at work, when my son was sick, when I was in corporate, if my mum or my ex-mother-in-law weren't able to watch him that day, which is not one of their normal days that they used to watch him, then I would have to take the day off because, and then I'd feel guilty. Yep. So, I don't have to deal with that anymore, which I didn't really realize was quite a big contributor to the stress, where I was like, okay, please don't get sick so that I don't have to, excuse me, take time off.
Yeah, it takes the pressure off. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I'm glad that you have found a way that is working for you. And of course, as you say, it ebbs and flows, it needs change, it evolves, what we need evolves, but it's beautiful that you found not just, and it doesn't have to be business, is what I want to tell people. Like for you, it's business has been that path, but we don't have to go and quit our job to find it. But what was key was you went, what do I need and want? What's in alignment with me? And then you found something that ticked those boxes. I think that's the beautiful lesson there. And also reminding people that it's okay if the minute that you change your situation, it doesn't all suddenly resolve and get better. I'm the same. Like I was diagnosed with my autoimmune disease in 2013. I'm still dealing with it. And that's still the recovery phase of my burnout. We're 9 years on and it's still a daily influence, but are things much better? Yes, but just, I think that's a nice reminder that sometimes it takes time and we just have to keep being kind with ourselves, don't we?
We do. And we have to stop feeling guilty for the things that we have no control over. I actually had a similar situation, and if I really had to pinpoint it, I think that's probably around the time where the burnout started to happen was in 2014, actually. I had a thyroid condition. I technically still have it, but it's been stable for a number of years now. But that's kind of where it all started. And that's the first time where I was questioned, in my performance. And that happened to be the time where it was a manager that, hadn't really understood what the situation was in terms of the training and things that I'd received. And I thought, wow, you're really going to pick now to pick on, what is happening for me. And you're right, like those kinds of things that just happen and they sort of blindside you and you suddenly have to deal with a new thing. They add all these layers of complexity to what's already going on and after that, I had to it was really stressful because I had to work from home for 4 months at a time where working from home was not really a thing that they did at that company. But it had to be done because by the time I got to work, I was so exhausted. Like at home, I couldn't even wash a plate without feeling exhausted. And I was constantly anxious because that's a symptom of the condition. And my heart rate was always high because of the condition. And so I always was like I was running, but I wasn't doing anything.
I get it. Yeah.
Totally get what you mean. It's like this thing that you have to constantly deal with and make sure that it doesn't activate or,
And it sounds like we were the same for a while. They just try to push through it and somehow work around it. And took us maybe both a while before we fully listened to that was a sign of burnout. I really think that things were going amiss long before that for me. I just wasn't listening to it. Yeah. But I'm glad that yours is much more stable. And I'm so glad that you have found now a path that suits you and that is aligned with you and helps you to manage, your stress and manage your state and be that independent person that you want to be. And I absolutely love that. So thank you so much for sharing all that. We're running out of time, so we might have to wrap it up now, but I just love those tips about exploring and finding what's right for you. I think that's absolute gold for our listeners. So thank you so much for sharing your journey.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Loved it. So I'm going to put in the show notes all the ways that people can find you. So you've got your website, you're on Facebook and Instagram, and you also have a Facebook group, Story Alchemy. So you can find Romina there. And you are kindly offering us, our listeners, a free downloadable journal prompts to get your inspiration going, to get writing if people want to at home. So I'll also add the link for that as well. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
It's been an absolute pleasure. And listeners, stay tuned until next episode. Thank you very much. Well, that brings to an end today's episode of Crash, Burn, Rise Again. It's been fantastic to have you with us today, and I hope you can join me next time. I also hope you've really enjoyed and maybe even learned something today. What I ask next is, if you're loving what you're hearing, please subscribe on whatever channel you normally listen to your podcasts, or on my YouTube channel. And you can also follow along and find all previous podcast episodes on my website, recastcoaching.com.au. If you're enjoying the podcast, the other thing I'd love is if you can share and recommend to any friends, family and colleagues who you think would benefit from a little bit of crash, burn, rise again. Thanks so much, and until next time, bye for now.